5 children were missing from the fire scene. Even their remains were not found from the ashes from the fire. While the police believe that all of them died from the fire and were burned to ashes, the parents believe that they were kidnapped and are still alive. What happened to the 5 children? Hello, welcome to Missing Piece. I'm Dr. P. Today we will talk about the mysterious disappearance of 5 children. On the night before Christmas 1945, in a small coal mining town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, which is home to thriving Italian Americans, a devastating fire broke out at the residence of the Sodder family. At this time, it was occupied by George and Jenny and 9 of their 10 children, while one was away fighting the war. George and Jenny Sodder, along with the 9 children, were asleep when the fire started in the house around 1 a.m. During the fire, George and Jenny was able to escape with 4 of their children, who are John, 23, Marion, 17, George Jr., who's 16, and Sylvia, who is 3. 5 children that remained in the house were Morris, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5, and they shared the 2 bedrooms upstairs. As he realized that he was missing 5 children in the house, George ran back into the house to save the rest of his children. However, the staircase was on fire. Then he went outside to retrieve a ladder. However, somehow the ladder was missing from his normal spot. He then attempted to climb over his trucks to get back into the house, but his coal trucks were strangely not starting despite working perfectly fine in the previous day. Meanwhile, Marion, the eldest daughter, ran to the neighbor's house desperately to call for help from the fire department, but the operator didn't respond to her at the time. When a different neighbor attempted to call the fire department, she also strangely didn't get any response from the operator. The same neighbor actually drove down to town and found the fire chief, F.J. Morris, in person. However, the firefighter bizarrely didn't reach Sodder's place until 8 a.m., which is 7 hours after the fire started. Despite that the fire department was only located 2.5 miles away from the Sodder's place. By the time firefighters arrived, all that remains was rubble and ashes that was previously the Sodder's house. Frustrated, the 6 Sodder's family members who had escaped had no choice but to watch the house burn down to ash. At that time, the fire department was low on manpower due to the war and had to rely on individual firefighters to call each other. Morris, the firefighter, said in the next day that the already slow response was further hampered down by his inability to drive the fire truck, requiring the wait until somebody can drive was available. Authorities, including state police and Morris, conducted a thorough investigation on the ashes left by the fire, looking for the remains from the 5 missing Sodder children around 10 a.m., which is 9 hours after the fire started. Morris told the Sodder family that nothing was found from the fire, and the 5 children were presumed dead due to the fire. He suggested that the fire may have been so hot that it burned their bodies completely, including their bones. While this theory sounds reasonable, it is not entirely accurate because when flesh has burned away, the bones are typically left behind. Additionally, there was no smell of burning flesh reported during or after the fire. 4 days after the fire, George and Jenny could not bear the sight anymore, so George later used a bulldozer to cover it up, although the basement of the house still remained, and Morris told George to leave the site undisturbed. With 5 feet of dirt over the site, George created a memorial garden for the lost children. The Fayetteville coroner's office convened an inquest the next day, which held that the fire was an accident deemed to be faulty wiring in the house and issued death certificates for the 5 missing children. Afterwards, Governor Oki L. Patterson and State Police Superintendent W.E. Burchett told the Sodders that the case was hopeless and closed it at the state level. which led to a billboard on Route 16 advertising the missing children that has remained for nearly 40 years. As they began to rebuild their life, George and Jenny started to question about all the official findings about the fire and suspected that the children were not dead but instead kidnapped. They believed that the fire was deliberately set as a diversion and not the result of faulty wiring. In fact, George actually had the power company checked on their wirings early the fall, which deemed that the wiring was in safe working conditions. They wonder why, if the fire has been caused by electrical problem, then their Christmas lights should have been gone out. However, the lights remained on throughout the early stage of fire. We will further discuss some of the later findings and suspicious occurrences that had led to Sodder's suspicion on the case. Meanwhile, let's talk about George's background and some personal history to provide some context. George Sodder was born with the name Giorgio Sodder in Tula, Italy in 1895. He had immigrated from Italy to the United States in 1908 with his elder brother, working from places to places as the construction worker and driver. After a few years, he started his own trucking company and his business prospered. The Sodder eventually became one of the most respected middle-class family in the world of one local official. With their business, George and Jenny was able to settle outside nearby Fayetteville, which has a small but engaged Italian immigrant community. In this community, George was very vocal and has strong opinion about his disdain for Mussolini. He was not shy about expressing them and also often alienated people and sparking some heated debate among the community. George has also reportedly never revealed why he left Italy, leading some to speculate that he might have been involved in some shady business in Italy. Many believe that either of these reasons may have led to the kidnapping of George's children. Okay, that's good enough for his background, and now let's examine some curious occurrences that support the possible kidnapping and dive deeper into the case. In October 1945, just before the house fire, a life insurance salesman came to the house, and after being rebuffed, he became infuriated and yelled at George, quote, "Your goddamn house is going up in smoke and your children are going to get destroyed. You're going to pay for the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini." Another visitor to the house, ostensibly seeking work, took the occasion and go around the house, especially in the back, and warned George that a pair of fuse boxes should cause a fire someday. It puzzles George since he just had the house rewired, and the local electric company has said that the wiring was fine. Furthermore, in the weeks before Christmas that year, two older Sodder children noticed a man watching younger Sodder children coming home from school on Highway 21. Another suspicious occurrence happened on the night of the fire. The telephone rang at 12:30 a.m. and Jenny went downstairs to answer the phone. The caller was a woman whose voice she did not recognize, and she asked for the name, however the name was not something she was familiar with. There was a sound of laughter and clinking glasses in the background. Jenny told the caller that she had reached a wrong number, and later she recalled that a woman was laughing weirdly. This would result in an important observation. Jenny noticed that the lights were still on downstairs and the curtains were not drawn, which are the two things that children normally attend to when they stay up later than their parents. Since Marianne has fallen asleep on the living room couch, Jenny assumed that the other children who had stayed up later would have gone upstairs to the attic where they sleep. She closed the curtain, turned out the light, and returned to bed. Around 1 a.m., as she started to fall back to sleep, she heard the loud bang on the roof, followed by the sound of something rolling. After another half hour, she woke up again from the smell of smoke entering her room. She discovered the room that George used for his office was on fire, around the telephone line and the fuse box, and the story goes as previously described. A few months later, when the snow had melted, Sylvia found a hot rubber object in the yard. an object that Jenny believed may have caused the loud bang that would occur that night. But what is more interesting about it is that the object was believed to be a napalm pineapple bomb, similar to those used in war at the time, after further inspection from George. Not only the bomb, the details are as interesting here as that the lights were still on. If the fire had been caused by faulty wiring, as previously suggested, then there wouldn't be any power to the house and the lights should not have been working. The Sodder later claimed that they saw the lights on while the fires occurred. Moreover, a witness claimed that they saw a man removing a block and tackle typically used for removing engines from cars, which perhaps explained why both George's trucks weren't working on the night. Additionally, a telephone repairman told the Sodders that the house phone line has not been burned through in the fire, as they have initially thought, but cut by someone who had been willing and able to climb 14 feet up and reach 2 feet to do so. A man whom the neighbor had seen stealing a block and tackle from houses around the time of the fire were identified and arrested. He admitted to the theft and claimed that he was the one who cut the phone line, thinking that it was a power line, but denied being involved in the fire. Jenny said in 1968 that if he had cut the power line, she and her husband and the 4 children would never be able to make it out from the fire. However, until today, the reason why he would want to cut the utility lines to the Sodder house while stealing block and tackle has not been explained. With all the strange occurrences and findings, and not believing that the fire would have burned her children's bones to ashes, Jenny started an experiment by burning different types of animal bones to see if the bones can be completely consumed by the fire. All of the bones remained. Then she spoke to a local crematorium employee who told her that human bones remained even after body burned at 2000 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours, which was far longer and hotter than the household fires could have been. So clearly that there should have been some bones left. Also noteworthy is that the remains of household appliances were found in the rubble, meaning not everything was ash. This certainly adds to the doubt in the official findings and led to continuous search for the missing children. There has also been several sightings of the children, which have ignited the Sodder's relentless investigation and search. A woman claimed to see the children in the car drove by while the fire was still raging. Another woman who operated a rest area 50 miles west of Fayetteville told the police that she saw the children in the morning after the fire and quote, "I served them breakfast. There was a car with Florida license plates at the tourist court too." The family's efforts soon brought another reported sighting of the children after the fire. At a hotel near Charleston, a woman named Ida Crutchfield, who ran this hotel, reports seeing 4 children out of the 5 missing children a week after the fire. Here is her statement to the police. "The children are accompanied by 2 women and 2 men, all of Italian extraction. I do not remember the exact date. I tried to talk to the children in a friendly manner. The man appeared hostile and refused to allow me to talk to the children. I sensed that I was being frozen out, so I said nothing more. They left early the next morning." In 1947, 2 years after the fire, George and Jenny attempted to involve the FBI, who offered to help, but the Fayetteville Police and Fire Department both denied the offer. Following is the FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover's response. "Although I would like to be of service," he wrote, "the matter related appear to be of local character and does not come within the investigative jurisdiction of this Bureau. If the local authority requested the Bureau's assistance," he added, "he would of course direct agents to assist, but the Fayetteville Police and Fire Departments declined to do so. This raises a question. Why would local authority deny the support from FBI?" A few years later, George saw a photo of the New York City school children in the newspaper, and one of the kids looks like his missing daughter, Betty. George drove all the way to New York to investigate, but once he traced down the child's parents, they refused to talk to him. In August 1949, the Sodder family persuaded a pathologist named Oscar B. Hunter to organize a new search that excavated the dirt covering the Sodder's basement and the remains of the house. He found 4 shards of human vertebrates and sent those to the Smithsonian for analysis. They hypothesized that the bones were from 16 to 17-year-old human. However, the oldest missing Sodder child was a 14-year-old boy, making it improbable that the bones belonged to him. They also stated that there was no evidence that the bone has been exposed to the fire and that the bone likely originated from the dirt George Sodder used to build the basement, rather than the remains from the house. As the Smithsonian reviewed their findings, West Virginia Governor Patterson called a hearing in the state capitol building in Charleston, West Virginia, where he officially declared that the Sodder case to be closed, telling George and Jenny that the case was hopeless and closed it at a state level. This led to George and Jenny setting up a billboard on Route 16, advertising their missing children, and this board remains there for nearly 40 years. The billboard kept the story alive and mentioned details such as the children being kidnapped, the fact that the faulty wiring did not cause the fire, and the fact that there was no bone or residue found, and lastly, accused the law officers involved of a cover-up. Quote, "What was the motive of the law officers involved? What did they have to gain by making us suffer all this year of injustice? Why did they lie to force us to accept the lies?" Unfortunately, this was before when DNA investigation had come into play. Also, according to the Smithsonian, the bones were given back to George Sodder. However, their current location remains a mystery. With unsuccessful investigations and lack of support from the local authorities, George and Jenny hired a private investigator named C.C. Tinsley from the nearby town of Galliebridge. One suspicious revelation occurred when Tinsley discovered that a member of the coroner's jury who decided that the Sodder house fire was an accident was the same life insurance salesman who had threatened George earlier that fall. How could you have some lunatic salesman as a part of the jury who had threatened George previously? And why haven't the police investigated on this salesman? Tinsley also learned about a rumor that Morris, the fire chief, found a heart in the ashes of the Sodder's house, and that he had hidden it in a secure box when Tinsley interviewed townspeople about the fire. Tinsley persuaded the fire chief to show him where he supposedly buried the heart, but what came out of the box was actually beef liver and had never been exposed to fire. Why did the fire chief Morris rumor to the people remains questionable. Another hopeful findings came in 1968, 23 years after the fire, in the form of a photograph sent to Jenny, specifically addressed to her, not family. There was no return address on the letter, but it was postmarked in Kentucky. This was the most credible evidence that his son, Louis, was still alive. The picture was a man in his 30s, and George and Jenny believed that this could be their son, Louis, who was 9 when the fires happened, and he could now be in his 30s if he had survived. The man in the picture had the same dark brown eyes, dark curly hair, strong, straight nose, and outwardly tilting left eyebrows. On the back, he had a handwritten note called, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie little boys. A 90132 or 35. Sodder hired another private detective to go to Kentucky, but strangely the detective never reported back to the Sodders, and they were unable to locate him afterwards. Some on the internet have theorized that the detective took the money and ran away, but nobody really knows what happened to him. People around the town has various theories. Some believe that mafias from Italy have been involved. Others believe that the children were now in Italy and that they have been sold to an orphanage. After all these years, the question still remains. What really happened to the Sodder children on the night of Christmas Eve? Was it truly a tragic house fire, or were the children actually adopted? What do you think? I do think that there is some foul play and the kids might be kidnapped. Do you think they're still alive today? Hopefully, for the sake of the remaining family who have suffered enough, all these questions will be answered, but for now, the mysterious disappearance of the Sodder children remain unsolved. This is the end of our story today. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by hitting the like button and comment below. If you enjoy mystery stories, please follow our channel for weekly mysteries. And you may also share our channel and videos with your friends and family. See you next time.